Have you ever felt like everything in your life was falling apart, only to realize later that it was actually falling into place? What if the chaos, the silence, and the loneliness weren't signs of failure, but sacred signals that you're standing at the doorway of the best stage of your life? When life begins to unravel, when routines dissolve and certainty slips through your fingers, it often feels like loss, failure, or punishment. Yet from a psychological lens, these disruptions may be the very signals that a deeper transformation is underway. The psyche does not evolve in straight lines. It speaks in symbols, dreams, inner unrest, and often through external chaos. When you feel like you are falling apart, you may, in truth, be falling into alignment with a greater version of yourself. What we typically label as crisis is frequently the beginning of individuation, the process through which the person sheds the false identity imposed by society, family, and ego, and begins to live from a deeper center. This is rarely comfortable. It feels like disorientation, grief, confusion, and even despair. But these emotional tremors are not signs of weakness. They are the symptoms of psychological rebirth. Consider how the caterpillar must dissolve within the cocoon before it emerges as a butterfly. This phase of liquefaction, where the old form is lost and no new form is yet visible, is terrifying if viewed only through the lens of preservation. But if seen through the eyes of transformation, it is sacred. So too with the human spirit. When the structures we built begin to crack, it may be because they can no longer contain the truth of who we are becoming. The personality, especially in early life, is shaped by adaptation. We learn to please, to perform, to protect ourselves. These layers become a kind of armor. They help us survive, gain approval, and find a sense of order in a chaotic world. But eventually, that armor becomes a prison. The soul, deep, instinctual, and expansive, cannot grow within false constraints. So it pushes back. It creates tension, discomfort, and sometimes even breakdowns to invite a breakthrough. It is important to understand that this process is not linear. You may feel hope one day and despair the next. You may be tempted to cling to the past or rush into distractions. But the psyche works in spirals, not straight lines. The discomfort you experience during this time is not just psychological. It is archetypal. It is the death of an outdated self, image, and the labor of something deeper and truer being born. One of the most misunderstood signs of entering a new, better stage of life is the feeling that you don't know who you are anymore. While this may seem frightening, it is in fact necessary. The shedding of old identities is essential for the emergence of an authentic self. This, not knowing, is not a failure. It is the sacred space between stories, the threshold between what was and what is trying to emerge. The task is not to escape it, but to remain present within it. This stage is often accompanied by a loss of energy for things that once felt important. You may find it difficult to engage in work, relationships, or routines that once defined your life. This too is a signal. The energy of the psyche is no longer willing to be invested in illusions. It is withdrawing from the surface to redirect inward toward the core. This is the prelude to renewal. Dreams may become more vivid during this time. Unconscious material rises to the surface, asking for integration. You may find yourself remembering childhood experiences, revisiting old traumas, or suddenly seeing patterns in your life with new clarity. These are signs that the unconscious is active, seeking to bring you into wholeness. One of the greatest dangers in this phase is the urge to fix it too quickly. The mind wants to problem solve, to restore order. But transformation does not occur through force. It requires surrender, patience, and the willingness to feel deeply. By sitting with the discomfort, by not numbing or escaping, you allow the psyche to reorganize itself around a new center, a more authentic, integrated self. This is where the seeds of the best stage of your life are planted, not in external victories, but in internal courage. The courage to endure uncertainty, to question everything, and to follow the faint but persistent voice within that says, "There is more for you than this." That voice is the call of your becoming. It will not shout. It will whisper. But if you listen, and if you trust the process, you will emerge not just with a new life, but with a deeper understanding of who you are and why you are here. So, when your life begins to fall apart, do not despair. Do not rush to rebuild the old. Pause, listen, reflect. You are not breaking. You are breaking through. As the journey toward transformation deepens, one of the most telling signs that a new stage of life is approaching is the emergence of increased self-awareness. This is not merely a surface level understanding of one's habits or preferences. It is the beginning of a profound reckoning with the unconscious, the vast, unseen forces that drive our choices, patterns, relationships, and fears. At this stage, the veil begins to lift, revealing the inner architecture of the psyche, including the parts of ourselves we have long ignored, denied, or repressed. Self-awareness in its truest form is not always pleasant. It is not just about discovering one's strengths. It is often about confronting one's illusions. This confrontation leads us directly into the realm of the shadow, that part of ourselves we have disowned because it seemed unacceptable, shameful, or incompatible with the image we wanted to present to the world. The shadow contains anger, jealousy, selfishness, trauma, and unresolved wounds. But it also holds vitality, creativity, and instincts that are essential for wholeness. The sign of awakening is when a person begins to see their shadow not as an enemy, but as a source of insight and integration. One of the most revealing aspects of this stage is projection. In our earlier psychological states, we are often unaware that what we see in others, whether admiration or judgment, is often a reflection of what lies within ourselves. When we begin to realize that our emotional reactions are less about other people and more about our own inner dynamics, we take a giant leap toward personal growth. This insight shatters the illusion that the world is responsible for our feelings and brings the focus inward. It is the moment we stop blaming and begin taking responsibility for our inner life. This increased awareness is often uncomfortable. It means realizing that much of what we have done in life may have been motivated not by conscious choice, but by unconscious wounds. We begin to see how our childhood experiences shaped our beliefs, how societal expectations molded our identity, and how unresolved trauma created survival mechanisms that no longer serve us. These insights are not easy to digest. They can evoke guilt, sadness, or even anger, but they are essential. Without awareness, there can be no true change, only repetition. Awakening to one's unconscious patterns is like turning on a light in a dark room. At first, the mess is overwhelming. But as the light stays on, clarity grows. You begin to distinguish between who you truly are and who you were conditioned to be. This clarity allows you to make conscious choices rather than reactive ones. You begin to respond instead of react. You start to question the scripts you have lived by, the stories you told yourself about love, success, worthiness, and failure. Importantly, this phase also comes with emotional complexity. As you witness your inner contradictions, the desire to grow and the fear of change, the need for connection and the tendency to sabotage it, you develop psychological maturity. You begin to realize that being human means holding opposites. Growth does not require perfection. It requires integration. Wholeness includes both light and shadow, both confidence and vulnerability. There may also be a growing ability to pause. Rather than being swept up in emotion or compulsive behaviors, you begin to create space between stimulus and response. This is not willpower alone. It is the result of deepening awareness. You catch yourself before repeating the old pattern. You notice the inner dialogue that once ran in the background. I am not enough. People always leave. I have to prove myself. And in that noticing, a new possibility opens to choose differently. Another key sign of transformation is the rising discomfort with inauthenticity. You may find yourself repelled by superficial conversations, unfulfilling relationships, or meaningless work that once seemed fine. This discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that your inner values are surfacing. You are no longer able to live out of alignment with your truth. The false self, once maintained to gain approval or avoid conflict, begins to lose its power. In its place, a more grounded, honest self begins to emerge, one that no longer needs masks to survive. This deepening self-awareness is also marked by the desire for inner coherence. You start to crave integrity, not as a moral ideal, but as an inner state where thoughts, feelings, and actions align. You become sensitive to when you betray yourself, even in small ways. You can no longer tolerate living in contradiction with your inner truth. This alignment becomes more important than external success or validation. Ultimately, increased self-awareness and shadow recognition are not ends in themselves. They are thresholds. They mark the passage from unconscious living to conscious being. They invite you to engage life not from fear or habit, but from choice and authenticity. They require courage, the courage to see clearly, feel deeply, and act with intention. When you begin to see yourself clearly, you are no longer a victim of your story. You become its author. You are no longer ruled by unseen forces. You become aware of them and can work with them. This awareness is the foundation of the best stage of your life. It doesn't guarantee ease, but it offers depth, freedom, and meaning. And from this ground, a new life can emerge, not one shaped by the past, but one rooted in consciousness. As the internal shift deepens, a profound psychological pattern begins to unfold. What may initially seem like a collapse is, in truth, a sign of rebirth. In this stage of transformation, life may present itself as a series of endings. Relationships dissolve. Long-held ambitions feel hollow. And the structures you once depended on, routines, identities, even beliefs, begin to crumble. But underneath this apparent disintegration lies a deeper truth. This is not destruction for the sake of suffering. It is the psyche's way of clearing space for a new self to emerge. The psyche is not static. It evolves, often in ways that feel unsettling. The moment you outgrow a certain phase of psychological development, life itself begins to press you toward the unknown. At first, it appears as a loss of meaning. Activities that once brought satisfaction now feel empty. Conversations become dull. The future, once a source of excitement, may now bring only confusion. This is the death of the false self, the persona that you constructed to survive, to be accepted, or to fulfill roles that no longer serve your soul. This collapse is painful because it calls everything into question. Who am I without this relationship? Who am I without this career, this title, this identity I have clung to? The ego resists this unraveling because its survival depends on continuity, on the illusion of control. But the deeper part of you, the part that seeks truth, knows that what is falling away is no longer aligned. It knows that endings are necessary precursors to genuine transformation. The image often used to describe this stage is the chrysalis. The caterpillar, in entering the cocoon, does not merely grow wings, it dissolves entirely. Its old form breaks down into a formless mass before reconstituting itself as something new. Similarly, in this stage of life, you are called to surrender what you have been in order to discover what you might become. It is a period of gestation, not destruction. But the experience can be terrifying because it requires trust without proof and patience without clarity. In this stage, solitude becomes both a companion and a teacher. You may find yourself withdrawing from the world, not out of depression, but because your soul demands silence. In that stillness, deeper questions arise. You begin to confront parts of yourself you have long avoided. You see patterns, wounds, and truths you could not see before because the distractions of the outer world had numbed you. This is the inner descent, the necessary movement inward to find a foundation that does not depend on external validation. It is also during this period that the unconscious begins to speak more clearly. Through dreams, symbols, synchronicities, and emotional disturbances, the deeper layers of your psyche make themselves known. What was once buried now surfaces. This can be unsettling, as it breaks the illusion of who you thought you were. But it also brings vitality. As the unconscious becomes conscious, life becomes more vivid, more textured, more alive. You begin to see connections where there were once only coincidences. You start to trust your inner voice, which had long been drowned out by the noise of conformity. Crucially, This stage is marked by a shift in values. Success no longer means what it once did. You may no longer be driven by achievement or applause. Instead, you begin to value depth over speed, presence over performance, and meaning over materialism. This is not a rejection of the world, but a reorientation within it. You no longer chase what the world says you should want. You begin to move from within, guided by a different compass. This collapse of the old and emergence of the new is also deeply spiritual. It marks the beginning of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, beyond conditioning, beyond expectation, beyond fear. It requires that you let go of the life you planned, so that the life that is meant for you can emerge. But this is not a passive process. It demands participation, reflection, and courage. You must choose to walk into the unknown, to trust the inner unfolding even when there is no guarantee of success or safety. One of the most surprising elements of this stage is the growing sense of peace, even amidst uncertainty. As you release the false self, you may begin to feel a quiet strength, an inner foundation that does not depend on circumstances. You begin to trust the process of life, not because it is always pleasant, but because you sense its intelligence. You feel connected to something greater, not as a concept, but as an experience. This connection brings resilience. You are no longer merely surviving, you are becoming. Eventually, as the inner restructuring stabilizes, a new clarity begins to emerge. You start to recognize what is essential and what is not. The people, places, and practices that nourish your soul become obvious. Your choices reflect your values. Your presence deepens. You become less reactive, more intentional, and slowly you realize what once felt like an ending was a beginning in disguise. This stage, the collapse and rebirth of identity, is not a detour on the path. It is the path. It is the initiation into the best stage of your life. For only by losing what is false can we discover what is real. And only by dying to the old can we be reborn into the truth of who we are. When you are nearing the best stage of your life, a subtle but profound shift begins to happen. You stop running from pain. This moment marks a dramatic transformation in your psyche. What you once feared, emotional discomfort, inner wounds, repressed memories, no longer sends you into retreat or avoidance. Instead, something in you turns inward with curiosity. Pain becomes a teacher rather than a tormentor. You start to recognize that every ache in your chest, every restlessness in your mind, every sorrow you carry, these are not accidents or punishments. They are signals from a deeper place within you, asking to be understood, not silenced. This moment of turning toward pain, instead of away from it, is a pivotal sign of inner maturity. The ego, in its fear of suffering, constructs layers of defense, distractions, addictions, overthinking, or overworking to keep pain at bay. But these strategies only defer the inevitable. The unprocessed pain festers in the unconscious, shaping your behavior in ways you do not see. It emerges as anxiety, resentment, depression, or dissatisfaction. But when you begin to face it directly, you initiate a process of integration. You begin to reclaim parts of yourself that have long been abandoned. This confrontation with pain often begins when old emotional patterns are triggered. And instead of blaming the outer world, you pause and ask, what is this really about? That question opens a door. You begin to see how much of your life has been shaped, not by your conscious intentions, but by buried wounds. Moments when you felt unworthy, rejected, invisible, or ashamed. These wounds carry energy, and that energy controls your reactions until it is understood and released. Turning toward this pain is not an act of weakness. It is an act of strength and wisdom. In psychological terms, this process is called shadow work. The shadow represents all the parts of yourself that you have denied, suppressed, or rejected. These parts do not disappear. They live in the unconscious, and they sabotage your life until you integrate them. Integration does not mean becoming perfect. It means becoming whole. To be whole is to bring light into the dark corners of your psyche, to acknowledge your anger, your envy, your fear, your shame, and to hold them not with judgment, but with compassion. This is the beginning of deep healing. You start to notice patterns that once operated unconsciously. You see how your need to please others, or your fear of failure, or your inability to trust, are all rooted in earlier experiences that were never fully processed. The moment you see them clearly, you create space. You are no longer identified with the pattern. You are the observer, the one who sees, and through that awareness, you begin to choose differently. This inner work leads to a transformation of your relationship with others. When you make peace with your own wounds, you become less reactive to the wounds of others. You become more empathetic, more grounded, less entangled in the drama of projection. You no longer feel the need to control everything, because you have begun to trust the unfolding of life. You recognize that discomfort is not a punishment, but a passage. It means that something new is trying to be born within you. You also begin to understand that healing is not linear. Old wounds may resurface, but now you face them with different eyes. You no longer panic or regress. You respond with curiosity and patience. You see these reappearances not as failures, but as opportunities to go deeper, to listen more carefully. Each wave of emotion, each moment of vulnerability, becomes a doorway to greater self, awareness, and authenticity. Moreover, this stage of your life invites a new level of responsibility, not to others, but to your own inner world. You begin to take ownership of your triggers, your projections, your patterns. You stop blaming others for your unhappiness. This responsibility is not heavy. It is liberating. It means you are no longer at the mercy of the past. You are rewriting your story from the inside out. As you continue this path of inner healing, a new energy begins to flow through you. It is subtle at first, perhaps a quiet confidence, a feeling of being at home in your own skin. You laugh more freely. You speak more honestly. You listen more deeply. Life feels less like something you must conquer, and more like something you are co-creating with the deeper intelligence of your own being. This is the gateway to the best stage of your life. It does not come through external achievements, but through inner alignment. It is not about escaping suffering, but about transforming your relationship to it. You understand now that your pain was never your enemy. It was your compass. It guided you inward, toward the parts of yourself that needed your attention, your love, your awareness. In this stage, you are not defined by what happened to you, but by how you have chosen to meet it. You have become an active participant in your own evolution. You are no longer waiting to be saved, healed, or validated. You are doing the sacred work of becoming whole. And in that wholeness, you find a peace that cannot be taken from you. A peace that says, I have faced myself and survived. I have loved the parts of me that no one else could see. I have turned my pain into wisdom, my wounds into strength. And now, I am ready, not just to live, but to begin again with deeper clarity, deeper purpose, and an open heart. One of the clearest signs that you are entering the best stage of your life is the emergence of a deep and unwavering sense of inner purpose. This purpose is not about achieving external goals or fulfilling the expectations of others. It is not about chasing titles, possessions, or validation. Instead, it is the quiet realization that your life has meaning. Meaning that is rooted not in what you do, but in who you are becoming. This inner purpose is not given to you by society or taught in school. It arises from your own depths, from the journey you have walked, from the wounds you have healed, and from the truths you have discovered along the way. When this purpose begins to surface, it often does so subtly. It may start with a restlessness, a feeling that your current life, no matter how successful or structured it seems, lacks something essential. You may begin to question long-held beliefs, old routines, or relationships that no longer nourish your soul. You might feel a growing urge to contribute something meaningful, to create, to serve, or to express yourself in ways that feel aligned with your deeper values. This is not mere ambition, it is soul calling. It is the voice of your true self urging you to live, not from fear or conformity, but from authenticity. At this point, you may feel a tension between your outer life and your inner truth. The life you have built may no longer fit the person you are becoming. This dissonance can be painful, but it is also necessary. It forces you to confront the parts of your identity that were built on survival rather than truth. You begin to realize that your worth is not tied to your productivity, your image, or your past. Instead, it is tied to your willingness to live in alignment with your essence. This stage often brings with it a redefinition of success. You no longer measure your life by how much you have or how others perceive you, but by how connected you feel to your own integrity. You start to ask new questions. Am I being honest with myself? Do my actions reflect my inner values? Am I living from a place of fear or a place of love? These questions become the compass by which you navigate decisions. And while the answers may not always be easy, they guide you toward a life of deeper meaning. As you grow into this new sense of purpose, you begin to recognize that it is not fixed. It evolves as you evolve. It is not a single goal to reach, but a way of being. It invites you to be fully present, fully alive, and fully engaged with your own growth. Even mundane tasks begin to carry a sense of sacredness because you are approaching them from a place of conscious intention. You are no longer living on autopilot. You are awake. In this awakened state, you become less reactive to external chaos. You develop an inner stillness that cannot be shaken by circumstances. This is not detachment or indifference. It is rootedness. You are grounded in your own truth. And this grounding allows you to move through the world with calmness and clarity. You are no longer trying to prove yourself. You are expressing yourself. And this shift changes everything. People around you may notice this transformation. They may say you've changed, that you seem more confident, more peaceful, more real. That is because you are no longer wearing the masks you once thought were necessary. You have shed the false identities that were built to please others or protect your ego. What remains is your essence, unapologetic, raw, and beautifully human. Living from purpose also means accepting that not everyone will understand you. Some may question your choices or even distance themselves. This, too, is part of the path. As you become more aligned with your truth, you naturally outgrow relationships environments, and dynamics that are no longer in harmony with who you are. Letting go is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of growth. It creates space for new connections that resonate with your higher self. Most importantly, a life led by inner purpose is one of service, not necessarily in a grand or public way, but in the simple and profound way you show up each day. Whether you are creating, teaching, parenting, healing, building, or simply listening, you are doing so with presence and intention. Your life becomes a mirror for others, showing them what it looks like to live from the inside out. Without preaching or persuading, you inspire through your being. And perhaps the most powerful realization of all is that this purpose was always within you. It was never missing, only hidden beneath layers of conditioning and fear. The best stage of your life is not about becoming someone new. It is about returning to who you have always been. It is about remembering your essence and allowing it to shine through everything you do. As you step into this purpose, life begins to respond in kind. You attract opportunities, people, and experiences that reflect your authenticity. You find that even in uncertainty, there is trust. Even in challenge, there is clarity. And in every moment, there is meaning. This is the sign you've been waiting for. Not a dramatic change on the outside, but a quiet, undeniable transformation within. You are not chasing your life anymore. You are embodying it. And in doing so, you step into a chapter not defined by external milestones, but by deep inner fulfillment. This is the best stage of your life. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are finally living as who you truly are. When the best stage of your life begins, it does not arrive with fanfare or external validation. It arrives quietly, through inner clarity, deep acceptance, and a renewed sense of purpose. It is marked not by the absence of struggle, but by your transformed relationship to it. You are no longer a passive participant in your own life, but an awakened presence, walking in alignment with your inner truth. You find joy not in constant achievement, but in authentic expression. The signs were always there: discomfort, detachment, self-reflection. and a longing for more. And now they converge to lead you home to yourself. This new chapter is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming who you truly are. And when you live from that place, life no longer happens to you. It flows through you with meaning, with grace, and with power.